Heartbreak, I learned, has no dignity. It does not arrive like poetry. It does not knock softly on the door and ask permission to wreck your life. It squats in your chest, filthy and stubborn, eating through your pride in slow bites until even breathing feels like an insult. For 4 days, I did not leave my apartment. The curtains stayed drawn. Empty food boxes leaned against each other like a collapsing city. The tea on my table had gone cold so many times that I stopped reheating it. My phone lay face up beside my pillow, her name still pinned at the top of my messages, the last conversation frozen in that humiliating little graveyard of things unsaid. Seen. No reply. That was the most hateful phrase in the world. I should have deleted the thread. I should have thrown away her books too. But heartbreak makes fools of men in small domestic ways. I kept everything exactly where she had left it, as if my misery could preserve the shape of what was already gone. One of her novels was still sitting on my desk. A thick historical romance bound in dark red silk paper, the title stamped in gold, The Crimson Oath. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed under my breath. Of course you liked something this dramatic. Maybe I opened it because I was bored. Maybe because I wanted to torture myself with one of the things she loved. Maybe because people in pain reach for anything that promises to fill an hour. Whatever the reason, I began to read. The story was set in an ancient court under a dynasty of jade roofs, vermilion halls, and ceremonial cruelty. At its center was a noble young lord from a powerful house, and his exquisite fiancée, and the man who stood forever half a step behind him, his shadow, his sword, his bodyguard. That bodyguard was named Lu Wen, and I hated him almost immediately. He was written as dangerous and devoted, stern-faced and sharp-minded, a man so foolishly loyal that he let love ruin the only life he had. He hid his feelings for his master, endured the sting of watching him become engaged, and made one desperate mistake after another, trying to claw back a place near him. His jealousy made him reckless. His recklessness made him easy to frame. And by the end of the novel, he was branded a traitor and executed. A tragic man, the book called him. I snorted. No, I muttered, turning the page. An idiot. He had no self-respect. That was my verdict. If he had just left, or if he had walked away with his life instead of offering it up to someone too blind to notice him, he would have survived. At some point, I stretched out across the bed with the book open on my chest. My eyes grew heavy. I remember reading one line in particular. Something about Lu Wen kneeling in blood beneath the palace lamps, while the man he loved could not save him. I remember scoffing, and I remember mumbling, half asleep. If I were him, I'd never go down like that. Then the world vanished. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the blanket. It was too soft. Not washed cotton soft. Not the ordinary softness of modern fabric. This was smooth and weighty, the kind of weave that seemed to glide over skin like water. Beneath it, the mattress was firm. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood, old incense, and winter cedar. And I opened my eyes. The ceiling above me was made of carved wood beams, stained the color of old honey. Pale morning light filtered through lattice windows. A bronze incense burner sat on a lacquered side table, shaped like a phoenix with outstretched wings. Beside it rested a folded guard sash, a pair of bracers, and a sheathed sword. I sat up too fast. The room spun once, then settled. I stared. Everything was wrong. I stumbled from the bed, crossed the room, and froze before a polished bronze mirror. The face reflected there was not mine. The man in the mirror had straighter brows, sharper cheekbones, darker eyes. His hair fell long over his shoulders in a black silk sheet. His robe was dark, simple, martial. There was an old scar near the collarbone just visible above the inner layer of his garment. My lips parted. A name slipped out without permission. Lu Wen. The sound of it made my blood run cold. I yanked open drawers, pulled apart folded garments, checked every corner of the room like I expected hidden cameras, a drug test, a prank show, anything except the truth that was already closing around me. No, 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 no. The door slid open with a sharp rattle, and a boy of perhaps 16 rushed inside. He wore servant's robes and looked one breath away from panic. "Captain Lu, are you unwell?" I turned toward him so abruptly that he flinched. The novel slammed into me all at once. Lu Wen, the loyal bodyguard, the doomed one, the man framed for treason, the man beaten, disgraced, and killed. I had not only awakened in a different body, I had awakened in the body of a man sentenced by the plot itself. "No," I whispered. The servant looked even more alarmed. "My lord?" I dragged a hand over my face. Think. In the book, this part came before the engagement festivities reached their peak, before Lady Bai's worst schemes, before the forged accusations that sent Lu Wen to his death, which meant I wasn't dead yet. I still had time. I straightened instinctively, and when I spoke again, the words came out in a courtly register I had never learned, but somehow understood. "I am well. Leave me for a moment." The boy bowed immediately. "Yes, Captain Lu." When the door closed again, I stared at it for several seconds. Then I sat down very slowly on the edge of the bed. "Wonderful," I said into the silence. I didn't just get dragged into a novel. I inherited its language, too. My laugh sounded thin and unfamiliar. Then memory sharpened. Lady Bai. Beautiful, delicate, smiling like spring water, poisonous as arsenic. In the novel, she had destroyed Lu Wen so neatly, it almost felt elegant. She used forged letters, carefully bribed witnesses, fake tears, rumors, propriety, scandal. She never raised her voice if she could help it. She simply arranged the world until everyone else did the killing for her. And Lu Wen, fool that he was, had helped her by acting exactly as she expected. Jealous, bitter, devoted, easy to provoke. I stood and faced the mirror again. The man in the bronze looked severe, capable, dangerous. Fine, I thought. Then I'll do what he never did. I'll survive. No jealousy, I muttered to my reflection. No schemes. No tragic loyalty. No dying for anyone. The man in the mirror said nothing, but his eyes looked like they already knew how hard that promise would be to keep. And the next morning, I heard his voice before I saw him. "Guard Lu." It came from outside the chamber doors, calm, low, smooth as polished steel. Everything inside me went rigid. That voice belonged to Chen, young lord of House Mu, heir to a military estate with close ties to the imperial court. Noble, refined, composed to the point of cruelty without ever quite crossing into it. In the novel, he was the axis around which Lu Wen's life quietly broke apart. I stepped out into the corridor. The morning sun lit the jade clasp at Chen's waist and made the silver thread in his robes gleam faintly. He was even more striking than the novel had described. Tall, graceful without softness. His features were beautiful in the cold way carved marble is beautiful. Too still, too precise, too distant to invite comfort. His gaze landed on me. For a moment, it was impossible to remember I had ever mocked Lu Wen for being doomed by this man. "My lord," I said, bowing, "I heard you were unwell." "I am recovered." He studied me with quiet concentration. His eyes were dark and clear, but there was something searching in them, as though he already sensed a change and had not yet decided whether to distrust it. "Good," he said at last. "Lady Bai arrives tomorrow. Make certain the east courtyard is prepared. She dislikes disorder." In the book, Lu Wen had answered this with thinly veiled resentment. I remembered the line exactly. A cutting remark, a small spark, one of many that later became evidence of his jealousy. I kept my expression neutral. "It will be ready, my lord." Mu Chen's gaze lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Then he turned and walked down the corridor, the light glancing off the ends of his hair. Only when he disappeared around the bend did I realize I had been holding my breath. Life in the Mu estate began before dawn. The mornings were disciplined enough to feel holy. Mist lay low over the training yard. The stone courtyards held the night's chill. Somewhere beyond the outer walls, temple bells from the city drifted through the pale air. Servants moved quietly under the eaves. Stable hands worked by lantern light. Guards assembled in precise lines before the first gong. I learned Lu Wen's body faster than I expected. How he tied his armor, how his sword fit his palm, how he stood at attention without shifting weight. The men around me watched with visible unease. In the novel, Lu Wen had been terrifying, harsh with subordinates, proud, exacting, quick to punish weakness. But I had no interest in making enemies I didn't need. When a young guard fumbled his spear form, I corrected his stance instead of humiliating him. When another forgot the sequence for courtyard rotation, I explained it once, calmly, instead of making him kneel in the yard. By the third day, rumor had spread through the barracks. "Has Captain Lu taken a vow at a monastery?" "No. Worse, I saw him smile." "You lie." "I swear on my mother's grave." One of the youngest recruits stared at me over breakfast as if I might sprout wings. "Captain," he said with tremendous seriousness, "have you been possessed?" I drank my tea. Probably. He nearly dropped his bowl. I would have laughed if I had not been too busy trying to stay alive. Lady Bai arrived under a noon sky veiled in thin spring cloud. Her procession swept into the estate like perfume-given flesh. Painted carriages, silk banners, maidservants in pale green, musicians, gift chests. Even the rustle of fabric around her seemed rehearsed. She stepped down from her carriage with measured grace, one delicate hand resting lightly on a maid's arm. Her robes were the color of blossoming pear trees, her hair heavy with pearls, her face arranged in perfect serene sweetness. And her eyes were sharp as fishhooks. She greeted Mu Chen first, of course, bowed low with all the right softness, smiled in the exact way a noble daughter should smile at her future husband. Then she looked at me. It was quick, brief enough that anyone else might have missed it. Assessment, recognition, dislike. So the story had not changed that much after all. When tea was served in the reception hall, she turned to me with polished courtesy. "Captain Lu," she said, "I have heard you have served at Lord Mu's side since childhood. How fortunate he is to enjoy such unwavering loyalty." In the novel, this was where Lu Wen replied with icy sarcasm and earned her lasting hatred. I bowed. "My loyalty is merely my duty, my lady." For the smallest instant, surprise crossed her face. Then she smiled wider. How proper. Mu Chen's gaze shifted from her to me and back again. "Captain Lu," he said, "see that the estate guards remain on alert." "Yes, my lord." I withdrew at once, grateful to leave the room before her perfume could sink any deeper into my lungs. The courtyard outside seemed cooler than before. One encounter survived, I told myself. One trap stepped around. Keep doing that. Keep breathing. May that night the moon hung low and red behind the estate roofs. I patrolled the outer wall alone, boots whispering over ancient stone. Beyond the walls lay dark pines, still ponds, sleeping roads. The estate lamps burned in ordered rows below. This was where the old Lu Wen had liked to brood in the novel. This was where his devotion had curdled into something desperate. I leaned against the cold parapet and stared out into the dark. I would not become him. I would serve. Speak little. Avoid scandal. Survive the engagement season. Then, if heaven allowed, I would disappear before the story found a new way to kill me. Footsteps approached. I turned at once, hand on my sword hilt. Chen stood a few paces away. He had changed out of ceremonial robes and now wore a simpler dark garment fit for evening. His hair was unbound, falling over one shoulder in a black line that caught the moonlight faintly. "If you had drawn that sword," he said, "I would have had to punish you." "I knew it was you, my lord." "That is not what your hand said." He came closer, not close enough to be improper, not far enough to be comfortable. In the silence, I became suddenly aware of little things. The cool night carrying the scent of cedar from his sleeves, the low cadence of his breathing, the faint glimmer of moonlight along his cheekbone. "You've changed," he said. I kept my face blank. "Have I? You speak less." "I used to speak too much." "You used to argue with me. Perhaps I have grown wiser." A trace of amusement touched his mouth. "Or more cautious." The truth of that was too sharp to answer. He folded his hands behind his back, studying me with a focus that felt dangerously intimate in the darkness. "Tell me, Lu Wen, are you hiding something?" I met his gaze. "Only fatigue, my lord." He did not seem satisfied, but after a moment he looked away toward the moonlit pines. "We travel to the Bai ancestral estate at dawn the day after tomorrow," he said. "You will accompany me." "As you command." When he turned to leave, he paused. For an instant I thought he might say something else. Instead, he only glanced back over his shoulder, and I had the absurd feeling that I had disappointed him by being exactly as calm as I intended to remain. The road to the Bai estate took 2 days. A noble procession in ancient times moved with all the elegance of a migrating kingdom. Carriages, horsemen, servants, trunks, guards, banners, luggage mules, kitchen wagons. Dust by day, on lanterns by night. I rode beside Chen's horse and spoke only when duty required it. Lady Bai traveled behind us in a carriage with embroidered curtains. From within came the sound of her laugh from time to time, light, charming, expertly tuned to linger in the air. I ignored it. By the second evening, rain forced us to seek shelter at a mountain inn built against a steep pine-covered slope. It was an old place with crooked beams, stone basins, and paper lanterns trembling under the eaves. Only 2 good chambers remained. Lady Bai lowered her lashes and said with breathtaking modesty, "I will gladly take the smaller room. I would not want Lord Mu inconvenienced on my account." Chen nodded once, then turned to me. "Captain Lu will remain in my chamber." The innkeeper blinked. Lady Bai's expression did not change, but something sharpened beneath it. "In your chamber?" she repeated too sweetly. "He guards me," Chen said. "Would you prefer I sleep unprotected?" "No, of course not." Her smile was flawless, but I felt the shift all the same. Inside the room, rain battered the roof so hard it seemed to close us off from the rest of the world. A single candle burned on the low table. Chen removed his wet outer robe and draped it across a screen. I stood near the door, sword at my side, pulse annoyingly unsteady. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me across the room. "You have avoided my eyes all day," he said. I did not realize I was expected to hold them. You were not. Then I failed to see the fault. His mouth moved, almost a smile, almost irritation. You used to watch everything I did. That landed harder than I wanted. I was a poor guard then. And now? I let a beat pass. Now I understand propriety better. He leaned back on one hand, candlelight turning his features to bronze and shadow. Do you? The room was not large. With the rain outside and the hush inside, his voice seemed to travel too directly through the space between us. I became aware of the loosened collar of his robe, the line of his throat, the slow way he was looking at me as if testing the edges of an answer neither of us wanted to name. Sleep, my lord, I said. I will keep watch. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he turned away. That should have ended it. Instead, I stayed awake for hours listening to the rain, the faint crackle of candle wax, and the distant sound of movement from Lady Bai's room somewhere along the corridor. Even from behind walls, she felt like a hand reaching toward a blade. When we returned to House Mu, preparations for the marriage deepened. Silk merchants arrived. Goldsmiths came with trays of combs and wedding ornaments. Astrologers argued over auspicious dates. Servants carried bolts of scarlet cloth through the courtyards like streams of blood. Lady Bai remained at the estate under the excuse of delicate health after the journey. Of course she did. Every day she arranged small performances. A request for books, a preference for a specific tea, a complaint about drafts in the East Pavilion. Tiny inconveniences that required the household to orbit her comfort. I knew what she was doing. She was not merely inhabiting the estate. She was studying the grain of it, testing where people bent, learning who could be manipulated, but waiting for me to make one mistake worth turning into scandal. One afternoon, a maid came to me during patrol rotation. Lady Bai requests your assistance. Refusing would have created talk. So I went. She stood by the lattice window in a robe, pale as magnolia petals, sunlight resting along her sleeves. To any careless eye, she looked gentle enough to pity. "Captain Lu," she said, "my carriage axle was damaged on the road. I am told the stable hands answer most readily to you. Could you arrange repairs?" "I will send word immediately, my lady." I turned to leave. "Tell me," she said. I stopped. When I looked back, she was watching me with a smile that held no warmth at all. "Do you follow him because you admire him?" she asked softly. "Or because you love him?" My pulse kicked once, hard. But outwardly, I remained still. I serve because I owe him loyalty." Her lashes lowered. How dull. I bowed and walked out before she could bait me further. The corridor beyond felt cooler, though my skin had gone warm. That was the true danger with her, not the accusations, not the false tears. It was how accurately she hunted the softest wound in a man and pressed until he bled. Her first real attempt came a day later. A servant found me in the West Garden with a message that Lord Mu required my presence there immediately. When I arrived, Chen was nowhere in sight. Lady Bai knelt beside a spilled tea tray beneath the flowering plum trees, one sleeve darkened by tea. Two maids hovered nearby, wide-eyed and anxious, in a way that looked suspiciously rehearsed. She glanced up as I approached. "Captain Lu," she said, voice trembling, "like you startled me." I did not move closer. "My lady?" "I slipped," she said, as if inviting me into the scene. This was the exact trap from the novel. In the original story, Lu Wen had stepped forward to help her stand. A servant had seen. By nightfall, rumor twisted the encounter into something shameful. The next day he was flogged for impropriety. Not this time. I folded my hands behind my back and raised my voice. "Attend, Lady Bai. She has fallen." Servants rushed in from nearby corridors at once. Garden maids, 2 footmen, a cook, another guard. The pair of ladies beside her panicked, contradicting each other before she could stop them. Within moments, there were enough witnesses to drown any future lie in its cradle. Lady Bai's gaze snapped to me. If looks could draw blood, mine would have painted the plum roots red. And when Chen arrived, summoned by the noise, his first glance landed on me, then on Lady Bai. "Explain." Lady Bai slipped on the wet stones, I said evenly. I called for assistance. Every witness nodded. Chen studied the scene. The crowded path, the scattered cups, the servants, her face. Then he looked at me again. The look lasted a breath too long. "I see," he said quietly. He escorted her away himself. As he passed me, his sleeve brushed my arm. It was nothing, barely a touch. And yet, I felt it long after he had gone. Weeks passed in a war of patience. A rumor that I had spoken sharply to Lady Bai in a corridor. A servant swearing he had heard me object to the wedding date. A tray of correspondence misdelivered with my seal. Each provocation was designed to pull me into anger. I let them slide off me like rain off lacquer. And then came the grain ledgers. The household steward arrived pale and sweating, clutching a scroll. "Captain Lu, these storehouse accounts bear your authorization mark." I unrolled the document. The signature was perfect. Too perfect. A beautiful forgery. My stomach turned cold. The next morning, I was summoned to the main hall. The entire estate seemed to hold its breath. Guards lined the walls. Senior servants knelt at a distance. Chen sat on the raised platform beneath the family banners, expression composed enough to cut. "Captain Lu," he said, "explain the discrepancies in the grain accounts." I knelt and bowed. "I cannot. I did not order those changes. The marks match your hand. They are not mine." Silence filled the hall like rising water. Chen descended the steps one at a time. He stopped before me. "Whether by negligence or conspiracy," he said, "this matter reflects failure. You will be confined to your quarters for 14 days. During this time, you will answer only to me." The punishment was lighter than the novel had given, but it still burned. Because he had doubted me. Because some part of him had looked at forged evidence and chosen distance over trust. Because I had nearly believed, like Lu Wen had believed, that perhaps if I remained steady enough, it would matter. I lowered my head. "Yes, my lord." He waited a moment, as if expecting protest. I gave him none. That, more than anything, seemed to unsettle him. Confinement taught me 2 things. First, that Chen found absurd excuses to see me. He came under the pretext of reviewing guard schedules. Then to ask after the training yard. Then to discuss border reports. Then, near eventually, with no excuse at all, except tea in his hands and silence in his eyes. Second, it taught me that staying near him might kill me in a way the scaffold never had. Lady Bai would never stop as long as she saw me as a threat. And Chen, whatever he felt, whatever he was beginning to understand, still lived under the rules of power, reputation, inheritance, marriage, command. I could survive Lady Bai. I was no longer certain I could survive him. For the first time, I considered leaving the estate. A transfer to a provincial military house. A post far from the capital. A border fortress. Anywhere that did not smell like sandalwood, rain, and near disaster. One evening I mentioned to a junior officer that a quieter post might suit me after spring. By the next morning, the entire training yard knew. And by midday, Chen was waiting for me at its center. The recruits disappeared at once when they sensed danger. He stood in plain training robes with no attendants, hands clasped behind his back, the wind moving lightly through his hair. "So," he said, "you intend to leave me?" "I intend to request reassignment." "Is that how you name abandonment?" I looked at him, startled by the edge in his voice. "My lord, I entrusted you with my life," he said. "And after one season of rumor, you think distance is loyalty?" His anger was controlled. That made it worse. I swallowed. "Staying near you invites danger." "From whom?" I almost laughed. "From your fiancé, from your house, from your doubt, from myself." Instead I said, "From circumstance." His jaw tightened. One by one he dismissed the remaining men until the yard was empty, except for the two of us and the sound of bamboo striking in the far practice court. Then he stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Enough that I could feel the heat of him in the spring air. "You never looked at me with fear before," he said quietly. I did not answer. "If I told you not to go," he asked, "would you stay?" My breath caught. That was not an order. It was something far more dangerous. It sounded almost like hurt. I forced my face still. My lord should not ask questions to which he may dislike the answer. His eyes darkened. He half lifted a hand as if he meant to catch my sleeve, then let it fall. "Leave," he said at last. I bowed and did exactly that. My heart didn't stop pounding for an hour. Spring deepened. Plum blossoms gave way to tender green. A carp flashed beneath the garden bridges. Festival lanterns appeared in the capital, and with them came the perfect excuse for Lady Bai to delay her departure further. Only 1 week remained before my service contract could be lawfully transferred. I counted the days like a prisoner counting cracks in a wall. Then on the 3rd night, the trap finally sprang. I had just returned from the outer wall when a servant ran into the courtyard, blood on his sleeve, gasping for breath. "Captain Lu! Lady Bai has collapsed in the West Hall. She says you struck her." The world seemed to lurch beneath me. By the time I reached the hall, chaos had already been arranged. Guards at the doors, maids weeping. Lady Bai on the floor in artful disarray, one hand pressed to her cheek where an angry red mark bloomed beneath the lantern light. Chen knelt beside her, his head lifted as I entered. "Who did this?" Lady Bai opened her eyes with perfect timing. "He did," she whispered, pointing at me. For one suspended instant, the entire hall stopped breathing. Then the whispering began. Not again, I thought. Not this scene. I knew this scene. This was the final accusation from the novel, the one that sealed Lu Wen's death. I forced my hands not to shake. "I have been on patrol for 3 hours," I said clearly. "Captain Lin can confirm it." The man stepped forward immediately. "It is true, my lord. Captain Lu never left the outer circuit." Lady Bai's lashes trembled. "He sent someone," she breathed. "He said I should be punished for slandering him." Brilliant. If she could not place me physically there, she would place my will there. The room tilted with helpless fury, and then I saw it. At the edge of the red mark on her cheek, beneath the lantern glow, was the faint metallic shimmer of powdered cinnabar. Stage rouge, old courtesans and actors used it to fake bruising. Relief hit so sharply it was almost laughter. I bowed. "If my lord wishes certainty, have her hands examined." Chen looked at me once. Quick, sharp, understanding, flickering too late, but still in time. Then he seized Lady Bai's wrist before she could hide it. Scarlet dust smeared across his thumb. Silence fell like an axe. Her face changed. Not much. Just enough. The softness cracked. The desperation underneath showed through. Chen rose slowly to his full height. "Explain." She trembled. I only wanted you to see that he is cruel, he finished, that he is dangerous, that I should cast aside a man who has served me all his life because you know how to cry. My lord, I did it for us. For us? The words came out colder than winter water. There is no us worth naming if it must be built on deceit. She stared at him, then at the gathered servants, still perhaps believing the performance could yet be saved. It could not after the look in his eyes. The mask had finally broken. Every false fainting spell, every rumor, every lie, every poisoned smile. He saw it all now. Not as isolated incidents, but as a pattern of calculated cruelty. I annul this engagement, Chen said. Gasps rippled through the hall. Lady Bai lurched to her feet. You cannot. I already have. He took one step toward her, and the force of his anger became visible even without volume. It tightened the room. It made the servants lower their eyes, made even the guards at the wall straighten. You shamed this house, he said. You tried to condemn an innocent man because your pride could not bear what you imagined between us. You will leave at dawn. If your family wishes to complain, let them begin by explaining how they raised a daughter who mistakes possession for devotion. She slapped him then. No. In the novel, she never lost control that way. But here, stripped of elegance, she did something even more revealing. She reached for him in desperate outrage. He caught her wrist, pushed her away, and in one hard motion struck her across the face. The sound cracked through the hall. No one moved. Lady Bai staggered, stunned, one hand to her cheek. Chen's voice when he spoke again was almost quiet. Take her away. 2 guards obeyed at once. Her cries followed her down the corridor, shrill and unraveling, until distance swallowed them. Then there was silence. At last, Chen turned to me. Everyone else in the hall understood at once that they were no longer wanted. One by one, they retreated. When the doors closed, only the 2 of us remained beneath the lanterns. He looked exhausted, not noble, not distant, not untouchable, just tired, furious, and very nearly ashamed. My lord, I began. Don't. He dragged a hand over his face. I need a moment before I ask your forgiveness and discover I have no right to it. I should have bowed and left. Instead, I stood there, trapped by the rawness in his voice. At last, he looked up. I should have trusted you sooner. Yes, I said before I could stop myself. Something painful flickered across his features. I know. I bowed. Then I will leave you to your thoughts. As I turned, his hand caught my sleeve. The touch was light, too light for a man who was clearly holding himself back from something much less restrained. Do not go far, he said. My pulse stumbled. I should have answered formally. Instead, I said, very quietly, I won't. After Lady Bai's disgrace, the estate changed. Not visibly at first. The banners still flew. The servants still moved in ordered lines. The kitchen still smoked before dawn. But the pressure in the walls eased. And Chen stopped pretending. He still carried himself like a noble heir. Still issued commands with elegant brevity. Still moved through the estate with that terrible natural authority. But now he looked for me openly. He summoned me for trivial matters. Captain Lu, accompany me to the city. Captain Lu, I inspect the south stores with me. Captain Lu, dine with me. The first few times I obeyed out of habit. Then I began refusing. Politely, carefully, but still refusing. He did not enjoy being denied. The first time I declined to ride with him into town, he appeared at the stables anyway, mounted, and waited in the dust like a prince staging his own insult. At last I came because the stable boys were too frightened to breathe. "Ah," he said as I approached. "So you do answer after all. You gave no direct order? Then allow me to correct that. Ride with me." I mounted in silence. Halfway to the city gate, he said without looking at me, "Do you ever tire of pretending you feel nothing?" "I do not pretend. That is a lie. Walls keep men alive." His mouth curved faintly, but there was no humor in it. "They also keep me out." I did not know how to answer that. In the market he bought things he did not need. A carved inkstone, silk cord, sweet cakes from a stall we passed twice. A red tassel he held up and asked, "Does this suit me?" "It suits the tassel seller's profits," I replied. He laughed once under his breath. Later that night, the tassel appeared outside my room. So did a bottle of plum wine, and the next day, a lacquered hairpin. Each time I returned the gift to his study. Each time it reappeared at my door. By the end of the second week, even the servants had stopped pretending not to understand what was happening. They simply bowed deeper when either of us passed. Summer arrived heavy and bright. The training grounds shimmered in the heat. Lotus flowers opened on the ponds, or cicadas screamed from the pines as if the entire province had caught fire. One morning, I dismissed the recruits early and was heading toward the shade when I found Chen waiting at the gate. He wore plain robes. His hair was tied low. There were no attendants, no documents, no excuses. "You did not come to breakfast," he said. I was not hungry. "Then lunch." "I have already eaten." "You have not." I looked at him. He looked back. The cicadas roared louder, filling the silence until it almost felt deliberate. At last he said, "You will run out of excuses." I should have answered with something cool, something distant, something wise. Instead, I said nothing. And perhaps that was what opened the last door between us. He took one step closer. Then, as simply as one might confess the weather, he said, "I love you." The word struck cleanly, without warning, without ornament. I forgot how to breathe. There are moments when the world becomes so sharp it hurts. I remember the shimmer of sunlight on the lotus pond, the scent of dust and crushed grass, a bead of sweat sliding between my shoulder blades beneath my uniform, the exact sound of a cicada faltering into silence. Chen's eyes did not leave mine. "There is no title I can give you that would equal what you are to me," he said. "No rank that would make this easier. So I will not hide behind either." My mouth went dry. "You should not say such things lightly." "I have not said them lightly." His voice lowered. "I have already handed the estate's governing duties to my younger brother." I stared at him. "What?" "The council, the court attendants, the marriage alliances, the future they prepared. I have stepped away from all of it." My heartbeat thundered. "You gave it up?" "Yes." "For what?" He looked at me then with such impossible steadiness that every defense I had built began to crack at once. "For a life I can choose." I laughed once, bitter and disbelieving. "You're mad." "Possibly. You would abandon your position, your name, your responsibilities." "I would abandon anything that demands I lose you." His hand lifted slowly, giving me every chance to move away. I did not. His fingers closed around my wrist. Warm, firm, gentle. The touch burned through me. "This is unfair," I whispered. "I know. You will regret it." His thumb moved once over the inside of my wrist, where the pulse leapt beneath skin. I already regret not saying it sooner. Everything in me wanted to resist, and to remind him of the punishment, the suspicion, the months of fear, the fact that love in this world had nearly been a death sentence. But standing there, under the white violence of summer sunlight, with his hand on me and his heart laid bare so quietly, I understood the cruelest truth of all. I loved him too. Not as Lu Wen had loved him, not as a servant kneeling toward doom, as myself, as the man who had arrived in this world swearing he would never die for anyone, and had somehow ended up wanting to live beside one impossible man for as long as heaven allowed. He searched my face. "Will you stay?" he asked softly. I looked at the lotus pond, at the drifting gold of afternoon light, at the shadow our bodies made on the stones between us. "For now," I said. Hope lit his face so quickly it almost hurt to witness. Then I added, "But not as your guard." His brows knit. "As what then?" I met his gaze. "As me." And for the first time since I had entered that cursed novel, Chen smiled without restraint. It changed him. It made him look younger, warmer, human in a way the old story had never allowed him to be. He did not kiss me then. He only tightened his hold on my wrist once, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he loosened his fingers. But the air between us had already changed forever. The first days afterward were stranger than battle, not because anything dramatic happened, but because everything didn't. No thunder cracked from heaven. No outraged relatives stormed the gates with swords. No chorus of servants fainted in horror. Life simply continued. The estate still needed managing. Horses still required brushing. Reports still arrived, and meals were still served. And yet, every ordinary thing now carried a new current beneath it. His gaze lingered too long at dinner. My sleeve brushed his hand when I poured tea, and neither of us moved away quickly enough. He came to my quarters in the evening with no pretense except, "I wish to see you." We took long walks through the rear gardens after sunset, speaking softly beneath hanging lanterns while the world beyond the walls dissolved into cicada song and jasmine-scented dark. Once beneath the camellia trees, he stopped so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath. His fingers found mine. Neither of us spoke. For one suspended moment, the entire night seemed to lean toward us. Then a servant called from the far path, and the spell shattered. He withdrew his hand at once. No, but the ghost of that almost kiss stayed with me for days. By autumn, the capital no longer held us. Chen accepted a ceremonial position overseeing a remote southern village, a place quiet enough to escape the court without wholly insulting it, far enough from the capital to breathe, near enough to remain respectable. When the day came to leave, the estate courtyard was pale with morning mist. Servants moved through it, carrying trunks, scroll chests, and the small practical things that build a life. The banners hung still. The horses stamped softly in the cool. Then Chen's mother arrived. In the novel, the Dowager Lady Mu had been formidable in the way mountains are formidable. Distant, dignified, impossible to move. She had spoken little and judged much. In person, she was even more imposing. Her hair was silvered and pinned with jade. Her robes were plain but costly. She stepped down from her carriage with the measured grace of someone long accustomed to being obeyed without asking twice. Attendants followed bearing gifts: silk, silver, preserved fruits, writing sets, household ledgers. Chen bowed. "Mother?" "So you truly mean to go?" she said. "It is not exile. It may look enough like one to satisfy your critics." Her tone was dry, not cruel. She ordered 4 trusted household servants to accompany us despite his mild objections, then turned her gaze on me. I bowed deeply, one knee to the stone. "Rise," she said. I obeyed. For a long moment she studied me with eyes far too intelligent to lie to. Then she said, "You followed my son through storms most men would flee." I kept silent, and at first I wondered whether it was loyalty or foolishness. She continued, "Now I think the two are rarely separate." Chen made a small protesting sound. She ignored him. "I have lived too long," she said, "to pretend blindness where love is concerned." The words settled over the courtyard like a bell tone. No one moved. She withdrew a scroll from her sleeve and handed it to Chen. "Land deeds," she said. "The southern estate is now fully in your name. If the court chooses to whisper, let it do so from a distance." He stared at her. "Mother." She cut him off with one glance. "Take what blessing I'm willing to give before I reconsider and become a proper tyrant." Then she turned back to me. "Look after him. He was never made for loneliness, no matter how well he wears discipline." Something tightened painfully in my throat. I bowed again, lower. "I will." Her expression softened by a degree only someone watching carefully would notice. "Good," she said. "Then perhaps rebellion will suit you both better than obedience ever did." When she left, the mist had begun to lift. Chen stood beside me in silence, the scroll still in his hand. "She always knew," he said quietly. "Yes." He looked at me. "Do you regret this?" The road south stretched ahead through pale fields and low hills veiled in morning light. A different life waited there, smaller, quieter, unrecorded by any author who might decide to kill us for beauty. I looked back at him, at the man who had once been my master in a doomed story, at the man who had chosen instead to become simply himself. "No," I said. "I have survived worse plots." His laugh was low and warm. "Then come," he said. "Let us write the rest ourselves." The village received us with cautious awe. They had expected an official, a distant noble with servants and decrees. Not a man willing to walk the irrigation channels at dawn, ask farmers about soil, inspect storehouses personally, and kneel without ceremony to examine a broken mill wheel. Chen adapted to quiet life more naturally than I expected. Or perhaps this was who he had been beneath the titles all along. We lived in a modest estate house by the standards of the capital, though to the villagers it still looked grand. White walls, dark tiled roofs, a garden of bamboo and pond stones, paper windows glowing gold at night. There were no grand banquets, no court performances, no endless procession of scheming nobles. Evenings became simple. Shared meals, tea on the veranda, reports read by lamplight, and the smell of wood smoke drifting from village homes, the sound of night insects in the reeds. And between those quiet things, the life that had once seemed impossible. He no longer summoned me as captain. He said my name differently now. Lu Wen. Not like an order, not like ownership, like recognition. Sometimes I would look up from polishing a blade or arranging account scrolls and find him watching me across the room with that steady, dark gaze that still made something hot and helpless move in my chest. One late summer night he asked, "Do you ever think of leaving now?" I shook my head. "No." "Good." There was a softness in the way he said it that made the single word feel like a vow. Autumn came slowly. Maple leaves reddened along the inner walls. Chrysanthemums opened beside the steps. Cool wind skimmed the pond and carried the faint scent of smoke from harvested fields. One evening, we walked through the garden after supper, lanterns glowing along the path. The world had grown so quiet around us, that I could hear the soft crush of leaves under his boots and the smaller rhythm of my own beside him. He reached for my hand, not abruptly, not with hesitation either. Just the simple certainty of a man who had waited long enough. His fingers threaded through mine. His thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles. A pulse of heat ran straight through me. We walked another few steps in silence. Then he said out of nowhere, "I am grateful I was once engaged to Lady Bai." I stopped dead. He turned toward me, one corner of his mouth lifting. "You look offended." "I am." He laughed. "Listen first." I crossed my arms, although he still held one of my hands captive. "If you insist." "She made me understand the difference between obligation and desire," he said. "Between being suitable beside someone and wanting to spend every impossible, inconvenient, unguarded moment near them. I did not know what I felt for you until I saw what I could never bear." The garden lights flickered in the autumn breeze. His face was close enough that I could see each shift of expression. Humor fading into something gentler, more serious, more bare. "I thought loyalty was enough," he said quietly. "Then I nearly lost you. And after that, every day without speaking became a kind of punishment." My throat tightened. He let go of my hand, only to lift it toward my face. His fingers hovered first, giving me time. Then they touched my cheek. Warm, careful, and the same impossible gentleness that had undone me from the beginning. "I love you," he said. This time the words did not strike like a blade. They settled into me like something long, waiting to be named. "I know," I whispered. His eyes darkened at that. "Oh?" I stepped closer. Close enough that the cool night air could no longer pass between us. "I love you too." Something in him softened so completely that it felt like watching a door open onto sunlight. Then he kissed me, not hurriedly, not with the hunger of something stolen, but with reverence. His lips brushed mine once, lightly, as if confirming this was real. Then again, slower, warmer. My hand rose without thought to his sleeve, fingers curling into the fabric. He stepped in, one arm sliding around my waist, and the world seemed to narrow to breath, warmth, and then the quiet sound of leaves moving overhead. When he drew back, our foreheads rested together, our breaths mingled in the cold. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. We did not need to. The night around us felt rewritten, not erased, not forgotten. Rewritten. And that, I think, was the true miracle. Not that I had entered a tragic story and survived, not that a doomed bodyguard escaped execution, not even that a noble lord gave up power for love. The miracle was smaller and more difficult than that. It was this: that two men who had once stood on opposite sides of silence found a way to step past it. That fate, once mocked, was not fixed. That love did not have to end at a scaffold simply because someone else had written it that way. I had once read Lu Wen's ending and called him an idiot. Perhaps I was one too. Perhaps anyone who risks his heart is. But when Chen's hand closed around mine in the lantern light, when the autumn wind moved through the garden and did not take him from me, I understood something I had not understood in that dim apartment in another life. There is a difference between dying for love and living for it. In the old story, Lu Wen was destroyed by devotion. In ours, he was saved by being brave enough to ask for more. And as the leaves fell around us in red and gold, ancient as blood and beautiful as fire, I let the last shadow of that doomed narrative loosen its grip. No court would judge us here. No false tears would condemn us. No author would drag us back toward tragedy. There was only the garden, the lantern light, his hand at my waist, his breath against my lips, and a future neither of us had been promised. But both of us had chosen. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.